So I'm Umesh Pandya. I'm co-founder and CEO at Wayfinder. Before that, I was assistant UX director at Us2 London, and we set up this program, which is a joint venture now between the RLSB, who are the Royal London Society for Blind People, and Us2, who are a digital product studio. We decided to set up a non-profit organization to tackle this problem. And we've been going for the last year, where we got funding from Google. They gave us a £1 million or dollar grant to kind of go away and figure this out, because we're trying to make lives better for blind people. And this is why. This is the reason. So we're on a mission to empower vision-impaired people to navigate the world independently, using effectively readily available, off-the-shelf, cheap technology. So over the last year, we've won a few awards, which has been great, but we're still looking for more money. So if anyone knows anyone, give us a shout. Yeah, well, the non-profit space is an interesting space. I come from a for-profit world, and now I'm trying to deal with a non-profit. It's interesting. But where did it begin? So we'll rewind back kind of 3 years. So early 2013, my wife, who's an optometrist, she works at Moorfields, we decided to see what we can do with our skills to help people living with sight loss. So we decided to kind of help and commit to this group. At my work at Us2, I was doing a lot of work in accessibility, inclusive design, user-centered design, and I'd also set up a program of work called Invent Time. And Invent Time was our kind of incubator, where we take Us2Bs out and put them away, lock them away for 6 weeks, to look at challenges around in a tech for good space, and where we allowed them to experiment with new technologies and new design methodologies and so on and so forth. So we kind of accelerate their learning, but we also move towards our company vision. I also had a great passion, and still do have a passion, around what's going to be the role of a designer when this connected world kicks in, and what does it look like? So I was interested in what happens beyond the screen, right? So when it's all embedded around us, what happens? And these were the things that are floating around my head, and I wrote this statement here, which was, as we weave computers into the fabric of our environment and being, we should aspire to create inclusive, trustworthy, and delightful products that dissolve effortlessly into our everyday life. And that's been something that I've been trying to validate for the last 3 years. Some of it's right, some of it's wrong, and some of it I have no idea about yet. But it all came together eventually when I came across the RLSB. So the RLSB had put out this youth manifesto. And what the youth manifesto outlined was the challenges that young blind people face today in London. So it covered everything from managing their finances, education, employment, getting around the city. And we took that manifesto, and we took some of the Youth Forum members who you can see in this video down here, and we worked together to see what we could create. So we did some simulation exercises. There's me up in the top right corner, traveling London's transport network, back and forward from home, big headaches wearing that all day. Don't try that for longer than a few hours. We did some observation exercises, kind of stepping back and seeing what's kind of around and what services are already out there. We did interviews in context, and we do this to the day as well. So we kind of take our interviews out and interview the users in context and trying to pick up learnings from there. And there's some questions that you kind of never would ever imagine when you're sitting in a room with a sheet, and while you're on the go, you're like, oh, actually, can you tell me a little bit more about this, or can you help us understand a little more? Because it kind of helps that dialogue. And co-creation has been really important, and you'll see that throughout our work. This is like a one thread that comes all the way from the Invent Time project all the way through to the organization, is that we work with others to create this future, because it can't be done alone. So why are we doing it? There's 285 million people living with sight loss worldwide. Of the 2 million in the UK, 42% say they would like to leave their home more often. Sadly, all too often, the consequences of living with sight loss are all too often isolation, poverty, and depression. So we want to lower this over here. The United Nations say, in their UNCRPD, say that it requires countries to ensure that persons with disabilities can access their environment, transportation, public facilities, and services and ICTs. This was put out in May 2008, and this UNCRPD was the fastest negotiated, adopted human rights treaty in history. There's 160 countries that have signed up to this. If we can kind of make our way up into that, that's kind of automatic, kind of how our cities should be built. We're working on how we influence that. This is from Gov.uk. 212 billion purple pound is the spending power of the disabled community and their families. This is another reason to do this. If your venue, if your business, if your organization is accessible, you stand to take a slice of that. Now, who wouldn't want a slice of that? You get more customers, boom, and you're doing the right thing. So our solution to that was to create the Wayfinder open standard for audio-based wayfinding. Yes, it's a mouthful, but it kind of covers off what we need to do. So what it does, it helps built environment owners, so like transport networks and retailers, and digital navigation providers, so that's like Apple Maps, Google Maps, and City Mappers, the tools to make their products and services inclusive. And it also gives them a common language to speak to, so connecting the physical world and the digital world. So how do I configure my space to make it work in the digital world so I can walk around indoors, but we keep the user at the center? So our standard starts around the user and the user needs, and then the technology floats on the side, because that will continue to evolve. Our approach to collecting the insight for this is we have a backlog. A lot of you will be familiar with this model. That backlog has been created by our community that I'll come on to later. So that's the shared community of different organizations and sectors that come together and agree this backlog. We take it into user research. So we take it out into the field and validate some of that. We've done user research trials and which we call demonstrators in London Euston Station. So if you go to London Euston on the way back, you'll see some beacons up. That's us. We've done some in Pimlico. We've done a couple of trials over in Sydney, and we're unpacking some large ones over in the States next year. So we collect all this insight, and we test it in the real environment with the real users and make real-time updates to our product. If the hypothesis is not validated, gets reframed, chucked back into the backlog. If it is, it makes its way through to the open standard. Now, the open standard is open for a reason, is that so that anyone can use it. So this is the conundrum. Non-profit gives away their IP openly, still tries to keep the lights on. So this is the challenge we're facing. But it's for the best. We need to move everyone forward together. We also expose our backlog into the standard as well. So we expose all the stuff that we believe that we need to know so that the community can help us kind of push that forward. This is a short video from our trial in Sydney. And you see this user's wearing bone conduction headphones. The bone conduction headphones gives them an audio instruction that augments their existing hearing and helps them kind of move around the space. In these tests, we're currently using Bluetooth beacons, which are designed for spam. We're using them for good. So when you pass a beacon, it effectively tells you turn left or turn right. It's really pretty simple. Depending on the environment, we use different approaches. You can use proximity, which is when you come into a region, it'll give you a trigger, or you can use kind of triangulation, which you can kind of pinpoint you in a larger space. It depends. So also, insight from the standard comes from our Wayfinder community and our working groups. So it's a mixture of many different organizations. So we've got charities in there. So we've got charities from the UK, we've got the World Blind Union, we've got organizations like Transport for London and Sydney Trains, we've got app developers who make bespoke apps for blind people, we have indoor positioning, navigation, hardware and software people, we have universities, and we have research institutions. Because we can only deliver this when all of us come together, because there's not that specific skill set in there. And the reason why it needs to be open is before indoor navigation becomes a thing, we need to have a standard out there so that accessibility is built in right from the beginning. Otherwise, it's going to be the classic problem I'm sure all you've experienced. We've done this product, and then someone goes, you know what, we need to make this accessible. And then you're like, oh no, how do we fit that on the roadmap? It's too expensive. Let's build it in from the beginning, because it doesn't cost more, and you can get more customers. So if you're want to find out more about the Wayfinder community or how you might be able to contribute, just hook us up, and we'll have a chat. So in the trials, and this is at Pimlico, I have observed that every time a vision-impaired person gets from their entrance right down to the platform, to their desired destination, by themselves, we see a change. We see a change in the perception of their own abilities. Right? We see their confidence kind of slightly boost, which is great. So taking that, we believe that as more products, services, systems adopt the open standard, we get the opportunity to increase those levels of confidence. So an end-to-end journey equals a confidence boost. So more end-to-end journeys, right? We start to make the change. So I can tell you a little bit about how we see that breaking down and how we might see that scale. So we know that it's common amongst the vision-impaired community that they're isolated at home. Now, they can memorize, the vision-impaired people can memorize 2 routes, mostly, some 2.5, that they're trained to go back and forward from. Usually a member of a family member's house, and if they're lucky enough, back and forward from work. I want you to concentrate on the 2 and the 3. So what the 2 does, it represents Wayfinder-enabled locations, so spaces that I can walk around indoors. The 3 represents those end-to-end journeys, also the journeys that can build my confidence. So you had a local supermarket, changes. Now with that supermarket, it's taking part of that 2.12 billion pounds. Great, just on cheese, because blind people like cheese, they do. So when you come to at a coffee shop, you had a museum, and you had a local gig venue. Just by adding 6 locations, you've got 21 opportunities to actually make a difference to someone's lives. Imagine that when that starts to scale out across chains and so on and so forth. But that's no good without the bit in the middle, the gooey bit in the middle, which is the transportation networks. And that's why you see all the work that we're trying to do at the moment is to work with transport networks to understand their challenges so we can build our product around their needs so that it can kind of roll out, and then we start to see the impacts that kind of rolls out. So in summary, what are the benefits of Wayfinder? Wayfinder supports venue owners and digital navigation services to evolve their product services environments so that all their customers, all their customers can use them. Wayfinder augments the user's navigation experience, working alongside their existing mobility aids. This is an important one. So we're not replacing the white cane, we're not replacing the guide dog, we're giving them information that they don't already have access to. We don't want to create a dependency on the technology. It's almost like a training wheels, if you like. Wayfinder enables independent navigation with readily available off-the-shelf technology. This is another one, which is assistive technology is expensive, right? Because it's bespoke for a certain group with a small market, which means the price goes up whether the audience can afford it or not. So we're trying to use beacons, which are being deployed anyway. We're just saying configure them in this way, and you can help people get around, and you use your phone in your pocket. So that's kind of a way that we're approaching it. You're probably thinking, this could probably be used for other people, and you're right in thinking that. So externally, we talk about vision-impaired people. Internally, we've got our users, if you like, are people that we call print-disabled. Now, who are print-disabled people? Well, they might be tourists visiting London. Now, this platform can be used for tourists to give you audio instructions in Spanish all the way around London, get to the airport, and go to wherever you want in your own language. That can be put in place. People with cognitive disorders, such as dyslexia or dementia, we can trigger images, or you don't have to read signage, you kind of get the audio instruction. Joe blogs, like yourselves, visiting a new place, so you're not buried in your phone, wondering where you are, but you can kind of just look up, have a look around, and get the instructions that you need. So it kind of brings it to you. And of course, people living with sight loss. So I'm going to show you a video of our first trial. And this was our first trial in Pimlico Station in early 2015. It gives you a feeling of what it might have been like if you were there. And this is kind of the thing that kind of propelled us forward. We did this test, we did this trial, and we thought, OK, there's something in it. There's no smoke and mirrors in this. This is the real deal. So I'll leave you with this clip.
Welcome to Pimlico Station. Follow the ramp down to the ticket hall. Turn left and walk down the stairs. There are 9 steps. Bear right and walk forwards to the ticket barrier. You are approaching the barrier. The down escalator is straight ahead. You are approaching the end of escalator. Walk forwards to the end of the hall. Turn left for trains to Walthamstow Central. Right for trains to Brixton.
Thank you.
Hi, that was a really fantastic project. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
My question was around errors and around like the whole customer journey. So if you've got, for example, a beacon that's been tampered with or that's got an error, how do you recover the user in their journey?
Right. So the challenge around large infrastructures, such as Transport for London, there's the user experience, and there's maintenance and operations. They're all different types of skill sets. So we're working with Transport for London to understand those challenges. So what if someone goes off track? How do they shut it down, right? Or simple scenarios such as, okay, the escalator is just going the other way this morning. How do you reroute people around? Or how do you reroute people around safely, right? So sometimes the shortest route isn't the best route. Or sometimes what we found with vision impaired people is that they'd rather take a longer route that takes them safely. So to your point, that's a operation and maintenance scenario that's being unpacked. But as Wayfinder, we create that standard, and any of that insight, we push that through to the standard so everyone can have access to that. So it's not kind of boxed off over here. Hence why we work with Sydney. We've been working in Sydney and London, and we work in the US, because we take we get our learning from London, we go to Sydney, it accelerates their learning. We take the Sydney and bring it back to London, we take it to the US. And by being an open standard, we can hopefully help these organizations move quicker than they normally would, basically.
I was actually really hoping you were going to say, oh, we've built in some AI in the other one so they can tell and they can recover.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you for your talk. It's very fascinating. By watching the video, I felt very machine-based. So what it means do this, do that, do this, do that. So have you thought about the user experience, like the machine telling the user, how do you feel today? Or, be careful to the step. Or it's a kind of human machine. Does it make sense? So I felt this computer system telling the user what to do, or be careful here, be careful that. How is the user experience using this machine? Does it make sense? I felt watching the video, I felt patronized. Yes, it is helpful, but I felt patronized. So doing your research, have you come up with any comments?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, so all the audio instructions we've had, when we started, they were really long. They were like, watch out, turn left, go down 9 steps, walk straight ahead. And what we've done when working with the users in our co-creation mode is actually reduce them down to just the bare minimum that they need. So all the insight, and in the standard, you'll see how to structure an audio instruction that's just enough to give you the information that you need. So through our research, we've refined how we deliver those instructions. Now, where we believe when app guys, Google Maps, City Mapper, so on and so forth, implement that, it'll be like a training wheels, right? So when you go to the station 5 times, maybe on the 5th time, you won't have the instructions. It'll only tell you what's different at that point. Right? So an interesting insight that came out the back of that is when we were doing a trial in Pimlico, we had users coming down, and one user came down and she did it like super seamlessly, like I think it was the 2nd or 3rd time. And then when we went back and started to ask her questions around the instructions that she had received, there's like a hole in the ticket hall area. She was like, well, I didn't hear any instructions. And then she made it down to the platform. Like, how did you do that? Was that like magic? She goes, no, I just memorized the route. Right? So we learned from that point, which is like, okay, we just got to hand off at some point to say tech is not going to be the full solution. It can be the part of the solution, but if we can make them better, in inverted commas, to kind of use this as training wheels, we've done our job, right? So then the reliance on the technology becomes less, and you kind of get empowered to do more.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Yumi.
Thank you.